Our Future is an ambitious and innovative partnership led by the Wildlife Trust and funded by the National Lottery Community Fund, with 31 projects across the UK focusing on young people and the environment. So supporting young people to lead, to upskill, to increase their skills and experience, and for young people to be at the core, leading positive change for their environment and their community. Next. And what we have achieved so far for like our bright future is that we engaged more than 115,000 young people. We created or improved like 2,800 green spaces, and young people achieved like more than 6,000 qualifications and awards, and almost 500 young people have gone into like full-time employment. And the next slide, please. So one of the best, like the most exciting opportunities that I had like in this program by working as a policy and advocacy manager was to co-create the 3 asks with young people and youth worker, everyone involved in the program. And there are now, like we've got 3 policy asks that I will go through them just to give you an idea of what the young people are asking for themselves, for their daily life, and for the environment. So we can start from the first one, the next slide. Learning more in and about nature. So young people ask to have more time in school, so like at least 1 hour per day of lesson time outdoors. And that's important to like then to lead the positive change, to experience the connection with nature and learning more about what the environmental like world is about. Then the next slide, the second ask is about like a more opportunities to get an experience in the environmental sector, with environmental jobs for young people, with that like a working experience. And it's very good to like that we've got the announcement today by the PM Boris Johnson of like more funding to go into this, into the conservation rangers, to like to support young people. So really needed like and a good step in the right direction. So the third task, and the next slide please, is about policy makers, decision makers, schools, charities to to pay more attention to the needs of young people and the environment. And the event today links very well with this the third task, because we have like created this webinar with Environment Agency with like the aim of like giving you an opportunity to learn more what Environment Agency does work on, and also to have your questions answered. So it's like the first of a series of events that we are planning to run, and I hope that you enjoy. So we will start with a video by Emma, the chair of the Environment Agency, and Jenny will follow up with a presentation on what the Environment Agency does, what are the area of works of the Environment Agency. Thank you. Enjoy.
Hello. Last month was the world's hottest May on record, and 2020 is on course to be one of the 10 hottest years ever. In this country, we had devastating floods in the autumn and in February, and since then we have had the sunniest spring on record. The world faces many difficult challenges right now, but as we grapple with them, the climate emergency is getting more severe. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change said we have until 2030 to hold global warming to 1.5 degrees above pre-industrial levels, or the situation will get out of control. Whatever you do with your career, the organisations you work for will have to deal with this. But that shouldn't just be scary. I hope you think that it's interesting and that working out how to overcome these challenges is exciting. At the Environment Agency, protecting the air, water, wildlife, people and the economy is our day job. We reduce the risks of flooding, help businesses and communities adapt to climate change, reduce pressures on biodiversity, and we enforce the law when people don't take their environmental responsibilities seriously. Today's focus is water. It's essential for everything in life, yet the climate emergency and a growing population are putting extraordinary pressures on this vital natural asset. I hope today's event helps you understand a bit more about it so you can make informed choices in your careers and in your lives. Thank you. Hello.
Brilliant, thanks Kath. So we heard from Emma, our chair then, and I'm going to give a bit more information on what we do in the Environment Agency. So my name is Jenny Forsyth. I am a project manager working within the Environment Agency on the Water Story programme. So what does the Environment Agency do? We protect and improve the environment. Within England, we are responsible for regulating major industry and waste, treatment of contaminated land, water quality and resources, fisheries, inland river, estuary and harbour navigations, conservation and ecology. We're also responsible for managing the risk of flooding from main rivers, reservoirs, estuaries and the sea. We help people and wildlife adapt to climate change and reduce its impacts, including flooding, drought, sea level rise and coastal erosion. We also improve the quality of our water, land and air by tackling pollution. We work with businesses to help them comply with environmental regulations. A healthy and diverse environment enhances people's lives and contributes to economic growth. We can't do this alone, however. We work as part of the DEFRA group, which is the Department for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs. We work with the rest of the government, local councils, businesses, civic society groups and local communities to create a better place for people and wildlife. On the next few slides, I'll be going into a little bit more detail about each of the areas I've mentioned. Okay, on the next slide, please. So we help reduce the risk of flooding from main rivers, reservoirs, estuaries and the sea to protect people and places. So how do we do this? We build and maintain river and sea defences. We help people understand their flood risk and what they need to protect themselves and their property from flooding. We work with local councils, water companies and other partner organisations to reduce the risk of flooding from heavy rainfall. We also advise local councils on whether proposals for new buildings will increase the risk of flooding. We also have a warning system in place from when flooding is expected from rivers or the seas, and we work with emergency services during floods. We also use our science and research to identify areas at risk from flooding and plan the best ways of reducing flooding in the future. Okay, next slide. We also regulate industry for environmental pollution and protect wildlife habitats so people can enjoy the outdoors in a responsible way. We do this by ensuring the farms, factories and other businesses don't release too many chemicals into the air, rivers or land. We work with people to help them meet their legal responsibilities. We prosecute anyone who willfully breaks the law and damages the environment. We regulate waste treatment and disposal sites. We license the removal of water from rivers and from underground. We also ensure water companies supply customers without harming the environment. And we also set and enforce standards for the quality of air, land and water. Okay, next slide. So what do we do to improve the environment? We measure pollution levels and where necessary, take action to improve the quality of air, land and water. We are responsible for cleaning up after major pollution incidents such as chemical spills on land or in rivers, and cleaning up places damaged by industry or neglect in the past. We work with conservation organisations to create and restore important habitats. We license fishing and improve rivers and fisheries across England. We license boating for the Thames and some rivers in Kent and East Anglia to help maintain these waterways. Okay, next slide. We also deal with incidents that affect the natural environment. We work closely with other organisations that deal with buildings, roads, water supply, and keeping neighbourhoods safe and clean. Examples of incidents we respond to include pollution of water or land, illegal fishing and distressed or dead fish, blockages that cause flooding in rivers, streams, canals, and damage to banks or flood defences, unusual drops in river levels and people illegally taking water from the environment, illegal dumping of hazardous waste or industrial waste, and problems with waste treatment and disposal sites. Okay, next slide. So the scale and pace of the changing climate means we need to think and work in different ways, not only to minimise our impact on the planet, but also to be better prepared for the inevitable consequences. We know the next 5 years are crucial if we're going to minimise wildlife loss, reduce emissions, and prepare for impacts like floods and droughts. We will shortly be publishing our new 5-year action plan, EA 2025, which will set out what we will do to face these challenges. Our philosophy is that we should do more than just survive a changing climate. Our aspiration is to help the country thrive in it. It will also showcase how we will be contributing to a range of other plans, including the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals and the government's 25-year environment plan. Last autumn, we also announced our goal to become a net zero organisation by 2030. This means that by 2030, we will aim to balance the carbon emissions we produce with those that we take out of the atmosphere so that we are no longer contributing to climate change. Hitting net zero by 2030 is already ambitious, but we're keen to go even further. So as we work towards net zero, we will also explore how to become an absolute zero organisation, one that does not produce any carbon emissions at all by 2050. Okay, next slide, Kath. Thank you. And I think we've got a little bit of time now to take some questions on what the Environment Agency does. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. So if you could type in the questions, then Kat will pick up some of the questions that are on the chat and we will ask them to Jenny. Not every question, we will not have time to cover all the questions, but if there are then questions that are not answered today, then we can we will answer in the follow-up to this event. So yeah, if you have got any questions that are like general questions for like the Environment Agency, please share them now. There is.
Okay, so we've got our first question coming in. How does the Environment Agency get its funding?
I can answer that, that's fine. The Environment Agency, we get a mixture of funding. So funding comes in from different places. For our flood risk, it's primarily funded through government. So it's called grant in aid funding. So this is all through the taxes and through other levies that you pay locally to the council to protect for flooding. But also on the environment side, quite a lot of our funding comes through licensing. So if any of you go fishing, you'd have a fishing license, and as part of that, money will go back straight to be spent just on fish and fisheries. But there's all other licenses. If you extract water, again, that funding comes through to us, and polluters, so industry, so where they pollute, they also need to provide us funding to help regulate them. So our funding comes from different places depending on the type of activity we're doing.
Brilliant, thanks Tony. Next question is, when is the Environment Agency 2025 plan going to be released?
Very soon. We're expecting it to be released within the next month or so.
Excellent. Another one is, what have the key successes of the Environment Agency been, such as influencing on government, or any other successes you want to think about?
Wow, that's a huge question. I mean, we're the biggest regulator in Europe of the environment. It's amazingly special to have everything joined together. So managing too much water, too little water, air, waste, all sorts of things in the same place, which does give us massive opportunities. So you can look back at things like bathing waters where you used to swim 20 odd years ago. Sadly, you may well be swimming in some raw sewage, whereas now that's not the case. There's a lot of regulation that goes through there. So there's particular things that you can visually see improvements. But the quality of the water itself is very different over the last few decades from what it was. I know from my own work, there's special work where you've been able to sort of break out rivers that have been hidden underground and actually see it locally, and have places where people can go and visit and see a frog and see some fish and actually see things, rather than before that the river was concrete underground. So for me, work like that I found really special. But there's all sorts of different things that the Environment Agency does and roles within it. So yeah, different things are interesting and a success for different people.
Excellent. I've got two very similar questions, so I'm going to combine them. So could you give us some information about what different careers you could have within the Environment Agency and the best way that you could begin those careers?
There are many different opportunities within the Environment Agency. We have a few hundred different engineers, and there's particular graduate opportunities. At the moment, we have a link up with Brunel University, so we can send these links out. So if engineering's of interest to you, there's particular schemes where we help train you. At the Environment Agency, they do help at the start of the career with that training, and then throughout. For me, I started on the science side, so I have biology training, and then within the Environment Agency, I was trained to work with engineers on the design of buildings, but also to work on looking for pollution and those types of things. So it was two different sides, and those opportunities might start from just sampling beaches, sampling rivers, those sorts of things, and getting to understand your environment. But we also have all sorts. We have planners, we have press and communication people, we have I'm just trying to think, all sorts of other types that within a large organisation you do get quite a mix, lawyers, those different types. So there's plenty of opportunities, but I think it's probably easiest if I send some links and show you a bit more information that way, if that helps.
That would be great.
Brilliant. And Roberta, how are we doing for time? Do you want a couple more questions, or?
Yes, one more, because
One
yes, then it will be 5. Yes.
Excellent. Okay, so now this might be one we have to come back on. Let's see. So does the Environment Agency have a view on the current government's water security or environmental manifestos? You may or may not be allowed to comment on that.
Well, I think if we wait, because I think that's part of the discussion we're about to have, and I think this is why we're very much coming to talk to people about the environment and what people want in their future and what resilience and security they see. So I think that if we hang on to those questions until after we've seen this video and the later discussion, if that's not answering the question.
Yeah.
No problem at all.
Perfect. So I think,
So it's a good link.
The link with the video, yeah.
Excellent. Okay. So,
and there is another question and answer session at the end. So, yeah.
Yeah, we'll come on to the rest.
We're working hard to ensure a bright future for all of us, but we need your help too. We're facing some big challenges about how we manage water, so we've got some important choices to make. Not only can everyone make small changes at home to improve the bigger picture, but we want to hear from you and learn from you. By having a say in the Challenges and Choices consultation, you can make a difference in shaping the way forward. Back in the day, up and down the country, we built our waterways around current need and around industry of the time. Many such structures have no current purpose, and it is impacting our wildlife.
So if you imagine being here 150 years ago, this would have been a peaceful river. What our predecessors did during the Industrial Revolution was introduce a lock and a weir that we can see behind me. That severed the navigation for the migratory fish overnight. Prosperity and growth was great from trade into the heart of Birmingham, but the environment suffered quite severely at the time.
We need to remove useless structures and let our waterways recover. Due to the pressure we have put on our waterways, 4 out of 10 of our lakes, rivers, estuaries and coasts are not achieving their ecological and environmental goals. This affects all of us and our local wildlife.
At the moment, the weir is a blockage. The salmon can get over just, but the shad, who aren't a great swimmer, can't get over there. The population before these were put in, we understand, was in the millions. Now, through research done by the Environment Agency and Seven Rivers Trust, we know there's about 6,000 to 10,000 fish, which is a tiny population.
Nowadays, we're working with natural processes instead of against them, restoring rivers and reconnecting them to their floodplains. This slows the flow of water, reducing flood risk for people living downstream.
This is Porthole Meadows in Huntingdon, and it's one of the oldest and best floodplain meadows in the whole of the country. During the winter or in periods of heavy rainfall, the water will come up and it will flood the site. And actually that's a really, really important part of how the site is managed, because if the floodwater comes on, it deposits some of its silt and then the hay is cut and taken away. So over time, this meadow is actually gradually cleaning the river. So it's a real jewel in the crown. It's really, really worth celebrating.
Rivers can be restored in other ways too.
Humans put in various dams and features which slow the flow. Beavers do that as part of their behaviour, so they create those complex habitats and just restore river systems to a healthier way of being.
When we brought the beavers in, they were here for 10 weeks. In that time, they constructed 4 dams. And the water going out, when we had the next significant rain, was actually much, much lower than the water coming in and much more spread out. We were changing not just the way the water was flowing, but all the biology and everything that comes along with that. And this has become like a real oasis. And in last summer's drought, for example, when the Environment Agency were pulling out dead fish from various rivers across the southwest, the fish here just got fatter and happier.
Small changes, big picture. Community action can play a real part in tackling these issues, benefiting all within your community now and in the future. Help at home, but have your say too. You've listened to us, and we want to listen to you.
Okay, so Tony, would you like to say a few words on this? Yeah, following from the video. Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So, yes, no problem. So can I just check that everybody can hear me? Just we're having a few connection things. Good. So I'm the Rethinking Water Manager at the Environment Agency. And what I was wanting to talk to you about is why are we doing all this consultation? So what we think is we urgently need to rethink how we protect and improve our rivers, lakes, estuaries and seas to find a better balance that meets the needs of people and nature. There's nothing more important than water. It's one of our greatest natural assets, yet demands on this vital, limited resource are increasing every day. The climate emergency and growing population are adding to these pressures, and without concerted action, it will lead to irreparable harm to our planet, ourselves and future generations. So water is fundamental to us, and some of Britain's most enduring tales involve our coasts and oceans. So I bet you learnt at school how Sir Francis Drake calmly played bowls as the Spanish Armada approached, secure in his knowledge of the local tides. King Arthur's famous sword, Excalibur, was handed to him by the mysterious Lady of the Lake, while the Isle of Avalon is reputed to have been where modern day Glastonbury now stands. So lots of our classic novels and poems like Robinson Crusoe, The Ancient Mariner, Lucky Jim, Jamaican Inn all reflect our seafaring nature. Water has been an inspiration not just for arts and culture, but provided the ideal conditions to improve livelihoods. So if you have a look around the country, most of our large cities are located next to water, which was necessary for their growth. It was shaped as we drained areas to improve our agriculture, and it was a key part of the Industrial Revolution, powering our mills, providing the energy source and a means of transportation that propelled the emergence of factories. And of course, providing food and fish for our plates. However, all this change means that very few of our waters, our rivers, are in their natural states. Most have been altered in some way, whether that's through physical changes to the banks on the river, the depth, the direction they go in even, or by pollution and various sorts making their way into the water. So pollution from agriculture, industry, roads, and even our own homes. But saying that, we've come a long way in how we manage water and pollution going into our rivers and seas. So for example, in treating our sewage after massive environmental issues, looking back, like the big stink in London, we're also much more careful with the water we drink. So during the current pandemic, it's worth remembering the first man to be considered an epidemiologist or disease detective was London Dr. John Snow. So in 1854, he was investigating an outbreak of cholera in Soho, London. Most people at that time believed cholera to be transmitted through the air as miasma, but Snow wasn't convinced. By plotting cases of cholera on a map, he identified a water pump in Broad Street as the most likely source. He proved his theory by removing the pump handle, so local people had to use a different pump. Cases of cholera immediately went down. Because of this work, improving sanitary conditions and water supplies, epidemic cholera was largely eradicated from England after 1870, despite having been a problem right across different countries. Snow is now considered to be the father of modern epidemiology. But still, looking forward, it's estimated that in about 25 years' time, unless we start to take some action now together, in parts of England we won't have enough water to supply our houses for their basic needs. The water that we use to support our needs is taken for rivers and groundwater. If we take more of our beautiful rivers, streams, lakes and estuaries, we will deteriorate further. Our water will no longer be a place for wildlife to flourish or for us to use and enjoy. However, we've still got time to rise from the challenge and take action now. And water will then continue its incredible journey into the next generation, clean, plentiful and valid. No one organisation, body or government has all the power, knowledge and resources required to rethink our approach to managing water, but together we can do this. So if we could go to the next slide, please. So through the work with Rethinking Water, we want to create a new water movement by changing this narrative and story about how we manage water at the moment. And our vision for the future is that our environment and communities as a whole are more resilient and vulnerable. We want to reframe our understanding of water and the water environment and debate the established approach and rethink the future of water and water management. We can all help by wasting less, you saw in the video, and this includes water. Better valuing the water in our rivers and seas. We could help keep our beaches clean and pass this message on to others. So careful what we put down drains, including our toilets, so no oil, no wet lights, no nappies, reduce water usage alongside reducing lights, our cars, plane, and using planes less. Perhaps keeping a bit of grass if you've got a garden rather than patioing it or turning it into a driveway, and help your local Rivers Trust or Wildlife Trust or biodiversity volunteers where you live. So why we're talking to you now is we have a consultation which, if you go to the site, it explains why water is such a vital resource, and we would like to hear your thoughts on the action that needs to be taken. It describes the challenges that we do have and that threaten the water environment, and it explores how we can work together to manage our waters and looks who should pay for the actions needed. But bigger challenges need bigger, bolder solutions, and we'll only find them together. So this is why we're talking to you, and we'd love to hear your ideas for that action that needs to be taken on the pressures we're facing and what you would like the environment to be like in the future. So if you, as part of this discussion, if you don't feel or ideas come to you later, please go to the website and add to them there. But it'd be great to now hear your thoughts and ideas, or perhaps what you would like to discuss in more detail in future panel discussions. So thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. So we are now at the second question and answer session. As Tony said, like if you could share like in the chat any questions that you've got for this second session, any thoughts around like your way of like saving water, protecting water, and then ideas for like the next events, like what you would like to focus on. So please start sharing so that we could, if there are any questions, we can ask environment agents or thoughts to share. While we are waiting, Kat, we can pick up the points that we left in the in the session before.
So the other question that we didn't get to, so in the first presentation, you talked about the Environment Agency being involved directly with conservation. And so they wondered, is that through surveying and monitoring? And if not, what would it be through?
Yeah, the Environment Agency, we have duties to improve the aquatic flora and fauna in particular. So one of my roles, I've been a biodiversity officer at the Environment Agency and a biodiversity technical. And as part of that, you will do a mixture of things. So one is to survey. So we would go down the rivers and survey what plants and trees, as well as help with fish surveys and invertebrate surveys to see what's in the river and around the river, because that can be just as important. And we use this information then to input to planning applications or permits. So if you want to build next to a river or over a river or next to an estuary or the sea, you'll also need a permit from the Environment Agency. So our ecologists or our biodiversity officers will input from a particular conservation point those aspects. So there's a mixture of roles. One is to do with surveying, one will be permitting, and also we do have an amount of money to improve the environment. So you would work on schemes to which are just about making the river or the estuary better for the wildlife that looks in there. And also we do work with our flood engineers, so working with them what the solutions and what the natural solutions to increase flood risks might be. So that would be your role as well. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you.
Jenny or others, if you've got other ideas on what we're saying, please jump in. But, I'm giving it a go otherwise.
So I'm just going to double check. I don't know that this is a question. Let me just see. No. But two of the young people on the call currently run a social action campaign called Sustainable Water Use Birmingham. And they've created a water management e-toolkit for businesses to use, which contains easy actions that they can take. So they think it's all about spreading awareness and making saving water easy for everyone to do. We'd be really happy to share a link to that as well. If you wanted to send it to us, we can send it with the resources. That'd be great. Thank you.
Please do. That sounds great. And absolutely correct. Sometimes it's just people don't know what they can do.
Yeah.
And then one more question come up. So what can the public do around kind of beaches and fly tipping and that kind of thing?
Well, I think we've all seen the horrible pictures in the press at the moment, haven't we, with people just not cleaning up after themselves, which is terrible. And I think some of that understanding of yeah, this is your responsibility and your waste. It's difficult to know exactly how to influence everybody for that. Sometimes it's fining people, sometimes it's influencing that they understand that, you know, all of that waste, one will end up in landfill, or worse, will end up in the sea, which is causing all sorts of problems in the sea, as we know. Interestingly, in workplaces where I think it's Natural England has done studies, signs where they've put up a turtle next to the recycling has made people actually recycle more, put a turtle with plastic rather than saying please recycle. So sometimes where we put signs up, do not fly tip, or those things, it's not always the best way to influence people. There's other things, but we do have quite large responses to particular persistent fly tipping. We do video and we prosecute, and our enforcement side of the Environment Agency, some of that is very criminal, the activity that's going on. They're trying to save money by not following proper waste protocol, and that needs a proper criminal investigation on those sides.
Thank you.
I will ask the next one. It's quite political. Do you think lobbying MPs on the water crisis is important, and do the Environment Agency get involved with this?
As a non-departmental public body, we don't lobby ourselves, but we do work with government a lot. So we provide the evidence, the science behind a lot of that, to MPs and to government to explain what certain things mean. I think it's really important to get involved in local politics. And some of the messaging, if you look on the consultation, says to contact your local council is important to some of this as well. They shape where your planning goes and where buildings are built, and a lot of that can have quite a lot of impact on the water environment. So yes, I definitely think getting involved in politics is a very good way and a very positive way of influencing. But the Environment Agency, we're independent of government, but our role isn't really to lobby them.
Do you want me to carry on, Roberta?
Yeah, perfect.
Excellent. Okay, so so obviously floodplains and flooding are integral parts of the river system. And with that in mind, how do you see the balance between management such as wetland restoration and beaver reintroductions and flood defences for developed floodplains? It was great to see the beaver in the video, actually.
Definitely picked that one with the beaver. That was Vicky's choice, and a very good choice. I think some of this, there's always been a bit of a balance between how we do things. I'm very much on the environment and the beaver side, but there is a way of, we do need to prove how some of this works, and in some places we don't have the space anymore. In central London, we have the same ways to protect flood risk, and there's been opportunities. I say London only because I work there, so I can actually visualize what I'm talking about. But in some areas we could take the wall back and provide some natural solutions, and restore some of the bank that's been sort of turned into concrete in the last sort of 50 years. And we can do solutions with barriers further down that aren't closed all the time, so we don't need to build concrete as high. We do need to protect buildings where people live, in particular, to a certain level of flood risk, but that it is only to certain levels of risk. That doesn't mean places won't flood under certain conditions. So looking at these solutions, I think, is a critical part, particularly going forward. I think the future of what solutions we use in engineering terms is working with the landscape and seeing what it can provide, where we've removed a lot of trees and those sorts of things, what opportunities are there. And along the coasts, we've been looking at where we can plant seagrass beds and salt marsh, which provide natural sort of flood risk and coastal erosion depending where it is, protection, and also store masses of carbon, even more than trees. I quite like it where it gets muddy and salty. I feel at home there, but some of the solutions they're doing, and there's quite large areas on the Medway where we've worked with farmers and RSPB to create areas for fish nurseries and also for birds, but providing massive protection for the areas and coastal erosion that's going on along there. So I think the future is those types of solutions, but I suspect there will be some concrete and some hard engineering as we go on as part of larger schemes, until we're comfortable with all of those type of solutions. But I think beavers seem to be here to stay. I'm not sure. I think that they've definitely captured people's hearts, and it's been a long old road to getting permission. We have to have government permission to introduce them, so that has taken a while, and lots of different bodies from the Wildlife Trust, Environment Agency, Natural England and others working to show that our European beavers aren't quite as industrious as our American beavers, who build quite a lot larger dams. They're much more akin to our own environment, not surprisingly. So they generally come from Northern Europe. Southern Europe are slightly different beavers, so we had to be specific where our beavers came from as well.
Excellent, thank you.
Yeah, I think generally it's a case of we get the balance by finding the right solution in the right place. You know, where we've got space and where we've got natural landscapes, then we will go for more natural flood management type solutions. But where we have got towns and cities, one of the jobs that I used to do in the Environment Agency was we give advice on planning applications. So when developers want to build something or change something, then they have to apply. And there's a number of organisations like the Environment Agency who offer some advice on those planning applications. We particularly comment around flood risk. So we try in most cases not to say no to what somebody wants to do. What we will do is look for a compromise solution. So perhaps somebody wants to build a big office block, but it's quite close to a river. What we would normally ask them to do is to leave some space on the ground floor where it might flood, make that open so that the water can come into that car park area and drain away without any damage, and that anywhere that's going to be occupied by offices will be above the level of any flood water. So we don't say no, we try and find a solution. So, for example, houses, we might say, where there is a level of flood risk, we can't always find, you know, there's a lot of us and we need to find places to live. We can't always build outside of any area of flood risk. And if there is flood risk, then perhaps there's things that we can do to design those buildings so that they're resilient to flooding. So we wire houses from the roof down, we make sure that the ground level is above the level that we would expect things to flood from. We tell people not to put bedrooms on the ground floor. So finding the right thing in the right place is absolutely crucial, but getting that balance does mean that we need to get a lot of people's views on what the right balance is when we're looking at that grand scale as well. So that's something that, you know, we do want to hear about in our consultation. Thank you.
Sorry, Kat. So Arwen has asked if we can put back the slide about what Environment Agency does, so that will inspire more the young people on what to cover next in the next events, if that is possible.
Give me a second, I'll find it. Would you take over the question just while I do the technical?
Yes. In the meantime, yes. So on the subject of water crisis, what is happening about HS2 with environment?
I wouldn't know the details on that. We can find out some of the information for you. I mean, that is a very large scheme and we will be involved in that. We will be working with them, as Vicky was just saying, on how to mitigate and compensate the type of impacts that you might have, and also where locations and the best place would be. But I don't know the specifics of that. You'd have to work on that project, and
but yeah, no problem. And then how do you help manage coastal erosion?
There's all sorts of different things that we do. In some places we have retreated and stopped managing because the costs have become ridiculous, all the way to we move gravel to provide support and change the shoreline. We provide stable flood defences within the beaches and the coastline to keep things stable, or we work with the processes because you get shoreline drift of different sediments and different aspects of that going down the shore. So there'll be a whole plethora of different solutions, and it will very much again depend on what the situation is there and what we're actually protecting. If we've got a nuclear power station, our approach would be very, very different to perhaps in some locations working with a farmer, and in some places working with them to change perhaps the farming practices, allow that area to flood on certain high tides or certain levels. And there's a lot of salt marsh land that's got quite a high price, and I know certain areas allowing that to happen has been advantageous to how the land is managed, and also to not having to be not trying to keep parts of the coastline exactly where they are when the environment kind of wants to shift them. So first you need to look at what's going on, what is influencing, and what the environment, where it wants to move, work with that and see if it is a case of changing the land use, or as I was saying, in some critical situations we will wholly protect it to a high level.
So there is a comment from Lawrence that is saying that it must also be remembered that recreating wetlands, both inland and coastal, is very important for stemming biodiversity loss.
Yeah, and it should be remembered it's all sorts of biodiversity. Some of those locations people very much see the birds that come back, and they're very, very important. But it's all the way to our nursery ground. So if we want sea bass in our sea, if we want all sorts of different fish, if there's nowhere for them to breed, which often these sites is where they go, particularly when they're juvenile, we need those areas for all sorts of different types of biodiversity. Plants as well, particularly along coastal areas. Those are the types of plants that we've lost because historically we've built quite close up to the coast, and then we're using the coast a lot for recreation, and some of those plants haven't really been able to have the space to thrive. So making some changes there.
Yeah. And then there is a comment by Zach saying, with COVID, how much water are we now using when washing our hands every time? And so the waste that is connected with that, do you know if there is an increase of water consumption connected with COVID-19 from previous years?
No, I don't think we've picked up necessarily. Sorry, were you answering?
Yeah, sorry. Some water companies are saying that they're seeing an increase in the amount of water that people are using, but it's been quite difficult to unpick how much of that is down to specifically hand washing, and how much of that is about the incredibly hot, dry weather that we had for that long spring period. So there's been an increase in water use, but we don't know whether one driver is bigger than the other. I think what is really important to say though is that we can cut our water use in other ways and find different ways to be more water efficient. But washing our hands in the middle of a pandemic is absolutely not one of those things that we should compromise on. Our safety and our health has to come first. So by all means, if you're worried about your water consumption, try and minimise your water use other ways, whether that's getting a water butt installed at home, or whether that's making sure that you turn your tap off when you brush your teeth, or maybe you flush the toilet a little less often. But when it comes to washing your hands and looking after your health, you absolutely must do that for the full recommended time every time.
Okay. Oh, perfect. Okay, so I think it's time to wrap up. And so there are other questions that are in the chat, but we will take them and respond, reply with the follow-up with all the links that we are also going to share. Also, while I'm doing the wrapping up, if you've got any more ideas for things to cover in the next events, please keep sharing those ideas. And and when we follow up with an email, you can also keep sharing or through social media. So I hope that you really enjoyed the event today. And as we said at the beginning, is the first one of a series. So we will organize more in future months. And if you keep an eye on our website, on the opportunities page, on the website and on social media, you will find out more of what is coming next. And we will also share the consultation on water management. So please take the time to have your voice heard on this important issue. Thank you for your time. Thank you for we are more than 20 young people joined the webinar, and so thank you so much for the incredible interesting questions that I learned a lot today, and I think everyone else. Sorry.
I was just going to echo that. There was very good questions, and it's really good to hear the interest that you all have in the environment.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Have a nice rest of your evening. Bye bye, everyone.